When my son told me that I would not be welcome at his house for Christmas, I smiled, got in my car, and made one call. By the new year, I had their mortgage payments canceled. And that was just the beginning of my plan. Justice must be restored and arrogance punished. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Chapter 4. Not welcome I could make my famous turkey this year, I said, easing myself a little. Deeper into Michael's sleek leather sofa, the sage and caramelized onion stuffing your mother used to love. Remember how she swore it was better than her grandmother's? My words floated over the warm living room like steam over a kettle. The Joe Malone candle on the mantelpiece whispered almond and vanilla into the air. And the fairy lights braided themselves around a tree so tall it seemed to smirk at the ceiling. Isabella's touch was everywhere. Silk curtains pooled like champagne at the skirting boards, a marble coffee table I'd helped source in spring, and those ridged velvet cushions that look expensive and punish anyone foolish enough to lean. Michael shifted beside me. His wedding band flashed as he laced his fingers together and then apart. Something in his shoulders pulled in, as though he was bracing for weather no forecast had mentioned. "Dad," he began, and already the word sounded like a step away. "Unfortunately, you won't be welcome here for Christmas." I blinked. For a heartbeat, I heard the faint tinkle of a glass upstairs, a door closing, the traces of a life that was not mine. "What do you mean?" I asked slowly. "Why wouldn't I be welcome?" He kept his eyes on the coffee table, tracing the thread of the stone with a gaze that ran and ran but didn't look up. "Isabella's parents are coming," he said, "and they'd prefer if you weren't here." "They'd prefer," I repeated. The words were clean and meaningless, like a polished spoon. "It's just easier this way. Dad, you know how her family is about traditions. They've got their own way of doing things." His voice thinned with each phrase until it sounded like he was apologizing under a duvet. I looked around their Richmond living room and counted the ways my fingers had been here before. The curtains I'd paid for when Isabella said the neighbors could see straight in. The oak floors that cost a year of my retirement savings. The crown moldings that arrived on my credit card like white swans and stayed that way. I could hear, faintly, the KitchenAid I'd bought humming its candy apple hum in the airy kitchen. Isabella's essential for a baking phase that lasted 3 weeks and left a trail of immaculate macarons and a bill north of $2,000. "Their own way," I said. "And what way is that, Michael?" He flinched, looked down, and I watched him shrink into a boy who used to bring me his school letters to sign. "Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Where will I spend Christmas then?" The question came out softer than I intended. It felt like asking permission to breathe. Michael's face folded. "Maybe you could go to Aunt Rose. Or we can do something the weekend after." The weekend after. As though Christmas were a parcel you could collect when the post office reopened. I stood, slowly. My knees complained like old friends. "I see," I said. "Dad, wait," he said. But it wasn't a command, just a shape of worry as thin as a reed. "I won't make it harder," I told him, and found my coat by the door, the one with the repaired cuff I'd stitched myself. From the kitchen came Isabella's voice, bright and careful as a shop bell. "Everything all right?" Michael didn't answer in words. He didn't need to. Some things you can feel crossing a room, settling in like a draft. Outside, the December dusk had dimmed to a London gray that looks like it could rain for years. The air tasted of chimney smoke and damp twigs. I clicked the car open, slid into the driver's seat, and put my palms flat on the steering wheel until they stopped shaking. Then I did what I said I would do. I smiled. I started the engine and made one call. "Chiltern and County Building Society. This is Harriet speaking." "Hello, Harriet. My name is Arthur Bennett. I'd like to cancel a standing order." There was the crisp clack of keys, the hum of a tidy office on a winter evening. "Of course, Mr. Bennett. Security questions first." I answered like a man who had spent 8 years answering for everyone. National insurance number. Postcode. Mother's maiden name. And then the details that mattered. A monthly transfer from my account ending 6135. to a mortgage account in the names of Mr. and Mrs. M. Bennett. Amount: $2,300. Due on the 28th of each month. Cancelled, Harriet said. Is there anything else? That will be all, I said. Thank you. Pleasure, Mr. Bennett, and Happy Christmas. Happy Christmas, I said, and placed the phone in the passenger seat as if it were a baby I had finally stopped. Trying to wake the thing about plans is they don't always feel like plans when you begin them. Sometimes they feel like making a cup of tea in a quiet house or untying a knot you've had in your pocket for too long. I drove home through Richmond Park, antlers black against a sky the color of tin. The radio muttered carols and the news took turns. A boy on a bicycle whizzed past with a Santa hat over his cycling helmet. Somewhere, someone's roast was catching, and laughter leaked through a cracked window. I live in a second-floor flat in Blackheath with a view of the heath itself and an honest wind that rattles the sash windows in March. It's not grand, but it's mine. Every squeak, every chipped architrave. When I opened the door, the place smelt like books and clean shirts. On the mantelpiece was a photo of Margaret holding a Christmas pudding with a sprig of holly like a crown. She'd been gone 8 years, and still I spoke to her. Well, Mags, I said, hanging my coat on its hook. You'll laugh at this one, I told her as I filled the kettle. About the Joe Malone candle and Isabella's velvet cushions and the bald phrase, "You won't be welcome," that had stood between me and my son like a policeman. I told her about the call to the building society when the kettle clicked. I poured the water over the loose tea and watched the brown unfurl like a map. We paid for their floors. I said to the photo, and the floors will be the first thing to feel the cold when the heating goes off. It wasn't vengeance that made me say it. It was an accounting of sorts. Ledger finally opened on a kitchen table, a pen uncapped, a straight line drawn. If you asked Michael, he would tell. He, and Isabella had done everything right. They married in a church with candles that had to be supervised, lest they drip on the stone. They took their honeymoon in the Amalfi and posted lemons so bright they looked edited. They bought the house in Richmond that had a little sign over the garden gate, the limes that made passers-by smile. They filled it with things that, on a good day, were beautiful, and on a bad day, were props. What he wouldn't tell you because sons don't tell the story in Moneys, that the deposit had come from me remortgaging the house Margaret and I had spent 34 years paying off, and that the refit had come from a second mortgage, and that the monthly mortgage payments for the last 3 years had been trickling from my account like blood. Just until the partnership, Michael had said, eyes alight with the salary he would one day deserve. He was a junior at a city firm with a view of the river and a temperament that made partners melt. There's the wedding to pay for now, Dad. We'll catch up. Just until the baby, Isabella had said, though the baby didn't come. The promotion, the kitchen renovation, the car lease renewal, the yoga teacher training course, season tickets at Twickenham, the second dog because popcorn was lonely, and me. I had said yes the way a habit says yes. I had said yes thinking I was keeping open a door that would always welcome me in. That's the thing they don't tell you about sacrifice. It doesn't guarantee you a seat, merely the right to stand. Until someone notices you. I slept badly that night. I dreamt of floorboards curling like leaves and Michael sang The Weekend After with his mouth full of ash. When I woke, the sky was white and undecided. I took my tea to the window, watched people stamp their boots across the heath. Dogs looping clouds out of their own breath. At 10, my phone rang. I recognized the number before I saw the name. My son doesn't call at 10 on a weekday unless he's been made to feel something. Dad, what's going on? His voice was the voice he used at school when he'd forgotten his PE kit. Warning and grievance, a tiny siren. What's going on with what, Michael? Harriet from the building? Society called me. The mortgage payment from your account has been canceled. Is this a mistake? No, it's not a mistake. A silence. In my mind, I saw him standing in the stainless steel kitchen, staring at the island as though it might explain itself. But why? Because I am no longer welcome in your home, I said. And it seems odd to pay for rooms I can't. Enter. For God's sake, Dad. He muttered something under his breath, maybe Isabella's name. You're being petty, am I? I walked to the mantelpiece and straightened Margaret's photo. I paid your mortgage for 38 months, Michael. Got your floors and curtains, your kitchen and bath. I paid for your wedding and for that honeymoon suite that came with its own butler. And at the end of all that, I am asked very politely not to come at Christmas to the house my money bought. It's not like that, he said, and I felt, like a draft, his shame. It's just complicated with Isabella's parents. You know how they are. You and Mom didn't do. You didn't do traditions the same way. We did traditions the way we could afford them, I said. He didn't answer. On his end, I heard a cupboard door close. Michael, I said, softening. I am not punishing you. I am stopping a foolishness I should have stopped sooner. You and Isabella are adults with an adult house and adult bills. You'll manage. I let the next bit sit until he had to pick it up. If you can't, you'll learn, he breathed out through his teeth. Isabella is going to explode. Then I suggest you stand well back, I said, and surprised myself by smiling. After we hung up, I called Rohit, my solicitor, who became my friend somewhere between probate and the time he ate my entire Christmas cake, because he'd never had one. Arthur, he said when he answered, tell me you're calling about mince pies and not mischief. Mischief, I said. And perhaps a mince pie or two, if we get it right. We met that afternoon in a cafe on Tranquil Vale that smells like warm croissants and raincoats. Rohit shrugged off his coat, shook himself like a spaniel, narrowed his eyes in the way that means he's about to save you money or win you a case. Bring me up to speed, he said. I told him about the disinvitation, the cancellation of the standing order, the terms of the loan I'd made to Michael and Isabella when they bought the limes. It wasn't a handshake, I said. We did it properly. It had gift for some. Loan agreement for the rest, secured by a second charge registered at the land registry. Rohit nodded slowly. 42% of the purchase price secured, he recited. Interest waived, no fixed repayment schedule, but a clause allowing you to call on the loan under certain conditions. Clause 7, I said. The moral hazard clause. He grinned. Only you would put a moral hazard clause in a family loan. It was Margaret's idea, I admitted. She said if we're paying, at least we should be able to insist on decency. Rohit found the relevant lines on the copy I'd brought him, ran his finger under them. Lender reserves the right to call in the loan in whole or part at any time in the event of material breakdown in familial relations as reasonably determined by the lender, or in circumstances where continued funding would be unjust or contrary to the lender's welfare. I can defend that. I don't want to ruin them, I said, surprising myself as the words came. I want to recalibrate. I want Michael to remember who he is without Isabella's parents shining at him like two chandeliers. And I want to stop being a purse with feet. Rohit tapped the paper. Then we start with a letter before action, he said, not to bludgeon, just to signal that the adult has arrived. We give them 3 options. Resume payments in full themselves within 30 days, refinance the mortgage, and remove you. As a second charge within 3 months, or sell the limes and repay your loan from the proceeds. If they want to keep you in the arrangement, you reserve the right to set new conditions. Holidays with you included for a start. Christmas, I said. And Easter, he said, raising an eyebrow. And not the weekend after. We both laughed. In the way you laugh when you have finally taken a spade to a stony garden and the first clod of earth loosens. Send the letter to both of them, I said, and copy in Isabella's parents. He paused, pen midair. Are you sure? Oh yes, I said. If they're going to have preferences, they can have responsibilities. That evening, I roasted a chicken and ate it at the small table by the window, watching the lights freckle the heath. When I washed up, I did it slowly, the way you do when you want to make the quiet last. Around 9, a message pinged onto my phone from a number that only texts when it wants something. Isabella, I cannot believe you would do something so petty and vindictive. You are embarrassing, Michael. We are family. I stared at the word. Family. The talisman she wore on a chain around her neck, it seemed, though it never turned towards me. I typed, then deleted, then typed again. Me. Families do not disinvite their elders from Christmas in houses those elders are funding. You and Michael are, of course, free to organize your holidays as you wish, and I am free to organize my finances as I wish. There was no reply. Somewhere in Richmond, I imagined Isabella pacing the kitchen, her nails clicking on her phone like a metronome. Somewhere beside her, Michael with his hands in his hair, talking to the marble the way he sometimes talked to me. By Friday, Rahat's letter had been delivered, hand-signed, firm but not cruel. By Saturday, Bernard and Penelope Fairchild invited. Meet to my surprise for a cup of tea to discuss this distressing development. We're in Chelsea, Bernard had said, on the phone in a voice that could butter toast by itself. Here, come at noon, won't you? We'll keep it civilized. Civilized. The word did something to my back. It made me stand straighter. The Fairchild's house is the sort of place estate agents euphemus, rarely available. A Georgian facade that makes you want to lower your voice. The door so glossy. You can see your misgivings in it. The front step was scrubbed, the brass letterbox polished to a sermon. Inside, it smelt of lilies and old money. Arthur, Penelope breathed, offering me her cheek as if it were a delicacy. She wore pearls. A cashmere jumper, the color of fog, and an expression of startled kindness that never reached her eyes. Such a shame about all this fuss. Bernard, tanned in a way London doesn't do, ushered me into a drawing room full of books arranged by color, the way people who don't read arrange them. He poured me tea with the gravity of a judge. We are terribly disappointed, Penelope began. Christmas is a time for togetherness. It is, I said. And I would have liked to be together with my son. She blinked, not used to being answered on the first bounce. Bernard cleared his throat. The letter Arthur, he said mildly. Strong stuff. Threatening to call in loans, bringing solicitors into what is essentially a family misunderstanding was. It a misunderstanding when you told Michael I wasn't welcome? I asked. Or are you hoping the word will launder it? Penelope's smile chilled by a degree. We simply have traditions, she said. We bring the family together for carols and supper, gifts on Christmas Eve and a late morning. They're running around. It's all rather hectic otherwise. And yet I mused. It wasn't too hectic when you needed help with the wedding bill for the vineyard you leased. I saw Bernard's eyebrows tick, or when your decorator came with an estimate for the guest room at the Limes. Or when Isabella's birthday needed a weekend in Bath for 8. Penelope's pearls lifted as she drew in a breath. Bernard set his cup down, very gently. Let's talk plainly, he said. You want to feel respected. You deserve to feel respected. But threatening your own son's home is not the way. Disinviting me from it is. He folded his hands. They were handsome hands, manicured and sun-browned. We have our ways, Arthur, he said. They have served our family well. Then you will have no trouble serving them without my money, I said. Stood. There was a silence in which the lilies did most of the talking. Penelope's smile did what it was best at holding its shape. You will tear the family apart, she said softly, without moving. No, I said. I will stop pretending it was together. Outside, the sky had decided on blue, thin, and brave. I walked down Sloane Street and treated myself to a mince pie from a bakery that displays them like brooches. I ate it standing, crumbs catching. In the scarf Margaret had knitted me and felt something like hunger for the first time in years. Not the kind that is soothed by food, but the kind that is soothed by truth. The first installment of justice is often boring. Emails, letters, the whir of a printer. But then it arrives, like a bell. On Monday, Michael called again, his voice a mix of resentment and hope. Dad, can we meet? Without lawyers? Just you and me? Yes, I said. Come to Blackheath. I'll make tea. He arrived looking like he'd slept in a suit. He stood in my doorway, and for a second, he seemed 14 again, trying to decide whether to apologize first or ask for a lift. Nice place, he said, glancing around like he'd forgotten I hadn't invited him over the last 3 years. Because I'd been in his house too often, fixing radiators and paying bills. We sat. I poured. We let the steam stand between us as if it could soften anything. Isabella's furious, he began. Her parents, well, you know how they are. And now there's this letter. You're threatening to make us sell the house. I'm giving you options, I said. One of them is to pay your own way. One of them is to refinance and remove me from your arrangements. One of them is to sell. None of them is to keep things as they are while I stay outside at Christmas. He rubbed his face. It's not about Christmas, Dad. Like it always is, I said. Christmas is where you keep all the stories you tell yourself about your family. He looked at the carpet my neighbor had given me when she moved to Spain and laughed a little. You and your lines. I had a good teacher, I said, nodding at Margaret's photo. She had a way with the truth, followed my gaze, and for a second, his face softened to its original version. I miss. Mom, he said. I do too, I said, and something cracked and said again, straighter. Isabella's parents can be intense, he admitted. They don't mean harm. They just like things done their way. Everything looks tidy in their world. And messy people ruin photos, I said. Is that it? He smiled. Guilty? Something like that. We were quiet a moment, and then I offered him what I had come to offer. Here's a proposal, I said. Not from my lawyer, from me. He straightened. Go on, you and Isabella. Take over the mortgage payment in full from January. I will not pay another penny towards your house. You will refinance within 6 months and remove my second charge. If you can't, you will sell and repay me from the proceeds. In the meantime, you will spend Christmas Day with me, not the weekend after. Not a drive-by on the 23rd. The day. We'll invite Aunt Rose. We'll make the turkey. And we will begin to behave like people who remember who they were brought. Up by, he let out a breath that sounded like surrender or relief or both. Isabella will never agree, and she will never agree, I said. And you, Michael, will have to decide which kind of family you want to be part of. He looked down, then up. You know I love you. I know, I said. I also know what your actions love. He stood, then sat, then stood again. I think you must, I said. After he left, I stood at the window and watched the light go thin and gold over the heath. I thought of all the time I had spent smoothing paths for Michael to walk on. I thought of all the Christmases that had smelled like cloves and oranges in Margaret's hair when she'd been standing too close to the oven. I thought of the call to Harriet, of Rohat's letter, of Penelope's pearls. And I knew that the real plan had not even begun yet, because justice isn't only about the bill, it's about the education. And I was a teacher for 32 years. That night, I opened a folder on my laptop, labeled the Limes documents, and scrolled past scans of invoices and emails. There, sitting where I'd put it 8 years ago, is the note Margaret had written in her neat hand. When we drew up the family loan, make sure the gift doesn't make fools of any of us. I wrote to Rohit with a new instruction. If Michael and Isabella refused the proposal, we would call in the loan in full and request assignment of their mortgage from Chiltern and County. It was a long shot the building society might prefer to keep it. But sometimes money moves in interesting ways when a man asks politely with a banker's draft. I slept better that night. In the morning, there was frost on the glass, and my breath made little clouds in the room. I pulled on my coat and walked to the butcher to order a turkey, because whether the house in Richmond knew it or not, Christmas was coming. I chose a bird that would feed 6, and for a second I saw the table, that old oak thing covered in a cloth. Margaret had spilled wine on her first Christmas as my wife. I felt a stubborn joy take root. At 12:30, my phone buzzed. A message from Michael. Will come for Christmas Day. I'll sort the mortgage. I don't know how yet, but I will. Can we have trifle too? I stood on the pavement, ridiculous with relief, and wrote back. Of course, and wear a jumper. The flats. Rut. The victory was small, provisional, held together by hope and the promise of custard. But I'll tell you something. It tasted like the beginning of a feast. And if you think that was the end of it, if you think that one letter and a turkey orders set the world to rights, you haven't met Bernard Fairchild. You haven't seen the way rich men smile when they're planning to teach you a lesson. The call came 2 hours later. And when I saw his name, I nearly laughed. Arthur, he purred. I've just had the most marvelous idea. Do come too. Lunch on Thursday? I think we've found a way to solve this. Impasse. To everyone's satisfaction? Lunch? I said. Of course. Where? The Garrick, he said, and I could hear the capital letters. 1 o'clock? Dressed decently. I hung up and went to my wardrobe. I own one suit that says respectable and one that says funeral. Chose respectable and called Rohit. Bring your decent tie, I told him. We're going. To watch a man try to buy back a Christmas. Asterisk, the Garrick smells like old wood and victory. The walls are lined with caricatures of actors who look like they could still tell a good story if you bought them a whiskey. The carpet hushes your steps and the light is the color of conversations you aren't meant to remember. Men of a certain age glide by with hair parted like treaties. Rohit stood beside me at the front desk. Tugging at a tie he definitely borrowed from his father-in-law. I feel like I should apologize to the portraits, he murmured. Don't, I said. They'll only ask for your papers. Bernard found us with the kind of smile that thinks it invented the handshake. Arthur, he said, hand outstretched. Rohit, good of you to come, Isabella and Michael? I asked. On their way, he said smoothly. In the meantime, I've asked a friend to join us, to keep things efficient. We were shown to a corner table under a sketch of a man whose eyebrows had made him famous. The waiter placed menus, with deference, as though they might bruise. Bernard ordered without looking, roast beef, claret, the pudding trolley later. Somewhere a knife flashed in the kitchen. The friend arrived then, in a navy suit that looked like it had a trust fund. Crispin Hargrave KC, he said, as though the letters might bow. Arthur Bennett, I replied. Retired teacher, cashmere jumper, no letters. Rohit introduced himself, and Crispin glanced, assessed, filed. King's Counsel, he corrected mildly, and sat. I caught a gleam of silver at his cuff. Little gavels. Of course I should. Say at the outset, Bernard began, placing his hands on the table like they were worth ensuring that we're all on the same side here. Family, after all. Oh, good, I said. I was worried we were at war. If he heard the edge, he ignored it. Things have got a touch overheated, but we can sort it, Crispin. Crispin folded his napkin with a precision that made me want to ruffle it. I've reviewed the documents, he said, nodding at the folder Rohit had already opened. The deed of gift is sound. Loan agreement is. Interesting. Clause 7 is my favorite, I said helpfully. The moral hazard one. Yes, he said, with something like amusement. One doesn't often see moral philosophy in a security instrument. He steepled his fingers. The short point is this. Were it to go to court, a judge might well find that Clause 7 is void for uncertainty. Rollitt's smile didn't reach his eyes, but uphold it on the perfectly orthodox basis that the lender's discretion is bounded by reasonableness and the facts. Perhaps Crispin allowed, in any event, litigation would be unpleasant. For everyone, he let the pause bloom, which is why Bernard and Penelope have proposed something elegant. Do tell, I said, because it's nice when people rehearse for you. A trust, Bernard said brightly. A family trust for future grandchildren. Your secured loan is contributed to the trust as a settlement. The second charge is released. In return, you receive a generous stipend for life, index-linked, beginning immediately. Everyone is protected. Everyone is respected. And he spread his fingers, no more nasty letters. The stipend, I said. Is that what people now call my own money given back to me slowly? Crispin's smile flickered. It's a way of regularizing expectations. It's a way of removing mine, I said. And what would I be expected to sign? An NDA? A deed of release? Promised to be only mildly inconvenient, and then only on weekdays? Bernard's laugh was meant to be disarming. Formalities, Arthur? We'd all be bound by them. Keeps you out of the grubby stuff. Rohit cleared his throat. We'd need to see the draft trust deed and the release. And the stipend calculation. Of course, Bernard said, as if we were quibbling over napkin rings. Shall we order? We ate beautifully. The roast beef was pink at the heart, and the horseradish cleared my head. I watched Bernard talk about skiing and watched Crispin, not quite talk about a case that everyone in the room probably already knew about. Rohit said very little and looked like he was memorizing the pattern of the wood grain. Michael arrived halfway through, with the air of a man who had forgotten his lines. Sorry, he said, kissing the air in my direction, and then Bernard's. Actual, cheek, tube, chaos. He sat between me and Isabella, who had come in with him and folded herself into the chair like a sleek cat in a hostel room. She was immaculate in navy, her hair plaited into something glossy, a bracelet at her wrist that caught the light each time she reached for water. Darling, Penelope's voice said in my head, though she wasn't there. Spine, chin, smile. I said, I let my eyes do the bit my hands wanted to do. He looked back, and something in his shoulders softened. Dad, he said, as if that word might shelter him. Let's bring you up to speed, Bernard said briskly. We're proposing a trust. I read the email, Michael said. He glanced at me, then at Crispin. It's clever. It's tidy, Isabella said. Which is what matters. To whom? I asked. To everyone, she said, with a smile that didn't quite have a temperature. We can stop all this nonsense and move forward? What would moving forward look like? Rohit asked mildly. Arthur gets an income and peace of mind, Bernard said. We put an end to these intrusive charges and letters. Michael and Isabella get clarity. We keep Christmases serene. I had the most serene Christmases when there was flour everywhere, and Michael was gluing the crown together, I said. Serenity isn't the point. It is if you're hosting, Isabella said. And then the faintest flush rose in her cheek, as if she'd given away too much. Crispin dabbed at his mouth with his napkin. The alternative is unappealing, he said. Call in the loan. They scramble. There are costs, publicly and privately. May or may not retain sympathy in any court that can sniff out an abusive process. Abusive process? I said, amused. For withdrawing money, I'm not thanked for providing. For deploying it as leverage in a domestic dispute, he said, all silken blades. Rohit leaned forward slightly. Let's strip the adjectives, he said. There's a secured loan. The lender has discretion to call it. He has grounds set out plainly, a material breakdown in familial relations. There's been a disinvitation at Christmas of the lender by borrowers to a house he's paying for. He shrugged. The equities are not on your side, Mr. Hargrave. King's Counsel, Crispin repeated, more from habit than need, and I'm a schoolteacher, I said, which is why I'd like to keep this simple. I took a breath and placed my hands on the table. They looked like my father's hands, work-stained even when clean. Here's my counterproposal, I said. No trust, no stipend. No NDA. You'll take over your mortgage payment in full from January. You and Isabella refinance within 6 months to remove my second charge. If you cannot refinance, you sell and repay me from the proceeds. In the meantime, you will spend Christmas Day with me. At some point before the turkey gets cold, you will apologize. Tss. Laugh was small and sharp. Apologize for what? For forgetting who built your life, I said, not unkindly. And for mistaking manners for weakness. Michael looked at his plate, then at me, then at his father-in-law. I told Dad we'd come for Christmas, he said quietly. That I'd sort the mortgage. Bernard's smile didn't reach his ears. You told your father that before you had the benefit of advice. I told my father that because it's right, Michael said. And for a moment there, he was the boy who used to stand in the garden in his pajamas to watch the first snow. Face lifted, sure it was meant for him. Isabella placed her hand on his forearm. Her bracelet flashed. Michael, she said. And he looked at her and swallowed. Crispin intervened, like a man guiding a boat back from rocks. No one is denying obligations, he said smoothly, or suggesting a grown-up way of meeting them without turning Christmas into an arbitration. Then, stop arbitrating it, I said. The pudding trolley arrived, as if to remind us that sugar still exists. Bernard ordered trifles all round, even for those who hadn't asked. While we're all being authentic, Isabella said suddenly, lifting her eyes to me. I should say something. Her hand tightened on the edge of the table. Head flicked towards her, and I saw fear and hope arm wrestle in the space beneath his eyes. "I'm pregnant," she said. The room went very quiet in my head, even if it didn't in real life. I could see the outline of it, a baby who has Margaret's nose and Michael's unhelpful ability to charm teachers. A sleepy hand, a life arriving like a letter no one believed would be posted. And then because I have lived in the world, I saw what they wanted it to do in this room: soften me, make me lay down my pen. "Congratulations," I said, because I meant it. Truly, Isabella blinked, unprepared perhaps for a blessing. Michael exhaled like a diver who sees the surface, and I said, "None of the proposals change." Crispin smiled as if to say that at least I was consistent. Bernard took a large sip of claret. "Think of the baby," Isabella said. This time not hiding the point. "We don't need stress." "Then don't create it," I said gently. "Come for Christmas. Pay your bills. Behave decently. Not stress dissolves in sunlight." Bernard wiped a non-existent crumb from the table. "Let's not allow stubbornness to disguise itself as ethics," he said. "And let's not allow money to call itself wisdom." I said. Rohit coughed, graciously cutting the duel. "If you intend to refinance," he told Bernard, "your lender's solicitors will need a redemption statement from us and an undertaking that funds will be sent on completion against release of the charge. We'll turn the statement round quickly, but there will be no DS1 signed in advance." Crispin gave him a look that said he had at least earned his lunch. Of course, we ate trifle. It was faultless. Layers of custard that tasted like school summers, strawberries that had no right to be so sweet in December. For a minute, we were all just people putting something good in our mouths and remembering that sometimes life is that simple. At the end, Bernard shook my hand with a grip practiced on oars or throats. "We'll draft the trust proposal anyway," he said heartily, "in case you come to your senses, and we'll instruct the refinance. No one wants a sale." "Instruct away," I said. "Just don't instruct me." Outside, the sky had gone. Pewter, Rohit, and I stood in the street and watched a bus sigh at the curb. "Well," he said. "Well," I said. "You're sure about refusing the trust?" "Yes," I said. "I will not be given an allowance by the man who taught my son to be ashamed of me." Rohit's mouth twitched. "Sometimes you make my job very easy," he said. "And sometimes you make me wish I'd done that master's in poetry." "Poetry would have told you to order the sherry trifle," I said. Back in Blackheath, the phone rang as I was hanging up my coat. Aunt Rose, with a voice like Yorkshire tea. "I hear we're having a proper Christmas," she said. "I've made the mince pies. If you say a word about gluten, I'll come over there and hit you with a rolling pin." "I wouldn't dare," I said, and found myself laughing in a way that loosened something in my chest. We may be 6 at table. 6. Michael and Isabella. It's possibly the baby, though only in theory. I said it lightly and heard her intake of breath. "Oh, Arthur," she said. "About time something sweet happened." "Sweet," I said, "and complicated. Like Christmas," she said. "I'll bring brandy butter and opinions." That evening, I wrote a list because lists are how I get through wars and Wednesdays. Turkey, two-bird, gravy, roasties, parsnips, sprouts, with chestnuts because Margaret had decided one year that sprouts were only acceptable with glamour. Trifle, obviously cheese. Crackers, matches, plasters. At 9. An email slid into my inbox. Subject, without prejudice, save as to costs. It was from Crispin. Attached to a letter that did what posh letters do, sounded like it was empathizing, while it tried to pick your pocket. He offered terms. They would, without admitting liability, pay half of the principal of my loan on the 2nd of January and the balance on the 1st of April. Provided I executed a deed of release of the second charge immediately, signed an NDA, and undertook not to initiate or threaten legal proceedings in relation to any familial occasion, including Christmas. The trust proposal would proceed in parallel, for my consideration. If I declined, they would seek declaratory relief that Clause 7 was void. And costs. I forwarded it to Rohit and called him because some things shouldn't sit overnight. "Charming," he said, skimming. They want the car keys before. They've paid for the car. I thought they might, I said. Response. He dictated and I typed, because old habits die last. Rejected the trust. Rejected the NDA. We confirmed our readiness to issue proceedings if repayment was not agreed within a timetable fair to both parties. We would provide a redemption statement for the refinance upon receiving the undertaking from the lender's solicitors, in usual terms, guaranteeing funds on completion and release of the charge upon receipt. We added almost as an afterthought, that interest waived to date would accrue at base +1 from the 1st of January if the timetable was missed. We did not mention Christmas, except to say it would be spent in Blackheath with turkey. Firm but festive, Rohit said. Send it. I slept moderately. Dreamed I put on a tie that turned into a ribbon and then into a snake. And then Margaret laughed and cut it with the good scissors. In the morning there was frost like sugar on the heathgrass. I walked to the greengrocer and bought chestnuts, and to the baker and bought a loaf warm enough to hold under my coat like a treasure. People carried trees like headless saints. A child in a prom sang away in a manger with the words in the wrong places in exactly the right way. At 11, the building society called Not Harriet. Another voice, brisk in a way that suggests a line of people need briskness. Mr. Bennett. Claire from Chiltern County? We've received instructions from a new lender Fairchild Private Bank to refinance the Bennetts. Mortgage at the Limes. Their solicitors have requested the discharge of your second charge. Would you be able to sign the DS1 today by email? It would really help them complete before Christmas, Clara said, and the word already felt like paperwork. I'm sure it would. I won't, however, sign a DS1 in advance. Your bank's solicitors can liaise with mine. You'll send a redemption statement and will release on receipt of cleared funds or a proper undertaking. Silence, blessedly brief. Of course, she said, apologies. I'm reading from a script Bernard wrote. I suspected as much, I said, and we both laughed. Happy Christmas, Claire. Happy Christmas, Mr. Bennett. I phoned Rohit. They're going fast, I said. They'll try to bounce us. They can try, he said. We'll send the redemption figure today. I'll insist on an undertaking from their solicitors no funds. No DS1. If they try to slip in a release of claims, we ignore it. Thank you, I said, and meant it in the way one means the word in trenches. The afternoon was for making stock. I browned turkey wings and celery until the flat smelled like November married December. I thought of Margaret's hands. I thought of the baby I hadn't expected to be expecting. I thought of Michael at 14 telling me not to come to sports day because my cheering embarrassed him. The look on his face when he saw I'd come anyway. At 4, my phone buzzed with a message from Bernard. It's unsentimental as a bill. We have an appointment at 10 a.m. tomorrow to complete. Please drop your signed DS1 at our solicitor's office in Chancery. Lane by 9, thank you, I wrote back. Please. Ask your solicitors to provide an undertaking to mine and a copy of their completion statement. Upon receipt, we will provide the redemption figure. The DS1 will follow on receipt of funds. The usual way, Bernard. He read it. He didn't reply. When the doorbell rang just after 6, I assumed it was my neighbor bringing back the ladder she borrows and never returns. It wasn't, it was Michael. Without a coat, cheeks pink from the walk, eyes bright with too many unfiled. Thoughts, can I come up? He said. You don't have a coat, I said. You'll catch something you don't have time for. I left in a hurry, he admitted. I put the kettle on because that's what we do when things are too big. For our pockets? He stood by the window and looked out at the heath like a man trying to pick the right path without a map. They're furious, he said. About the undertaking, about you, about me, and you. Tired, he said, but also, oddly, less tired than I've felt in years. Good, I said, and poured. You can afford to be tired when you know where the bed is. He smiled into his cup. Isabella's parents think you're cruel. They would, I said. Threatens their favorite illusion. What's that? Is that money makes you kind? He scratched the back of his neck, the way he used to when a maths problem broke into sense. The baby, he said softly. It's real. I know, I said. I could hear it in your voice when she said it. I don't want you to. Think that we used, I don't, I said. I think you used what you had. And now you know which things are tools and which are treasures. He nodded. We sat, steam making little clouds above our cups. Isabella will come for Christmas, he said, but she'll be brittle. Then we will wrap her in gravy, I said. We will not make her help wash up. He laughed properly then, head back, and the boy came all the way back before vanishing again into the man. When he left, put his hands on my shoulders the way he used to do when he was taller than me for the first time and wanted to be gentle. With it? I'm sorry, he said. I know, I said. So am I. He paused in the corridor. Dad? Yes. Thank you for not selling the house to prove a point. Who said I wouldn't? I said lightly, and he rolled his eyes in the precise way his mother used to. The email from Rohit pinged just after he closed the door behind him. He'd sent the redemption statement to Fairchild Private Banks. Solicitors, with a short note that had more spine in it than some men bring to a duel, please note that release of our client's charge will be effected only upon receipt of funds in accordance with the attached redemption statement or upon receipt of an undertaking in the enclosed form. No DS1 will be provided in advance. Kindly also note that any additional documents sent for execution purporting to vary our client's position will be ignored, they replied. It's minutes later with an undertaking that was almost perfect. Almost. Line 4 asked me to agree that all claims past and future arising from any family arrangements would be deemed settled on completion. Rohit sent it back with that one line struck through and a smile in the email that wasn't there. Try again. We waited. The light drained out. Of the day, as if the sky had a leak, I lit the little lamp on the bookshelf that Margaret had won at a school raffle in 1987 and made her laugh every time it was turned on because somewhere in it there is a tiny mechanical hum like a bee that cannot give up. At 8:30, the undertaking came, clean this time. Rohit phoned me, and for the first time since he entered my life by delivering dreadful news about a will, his voice sounded merry. Tomorrow, if they complete, you'll have your money, he said. And then, what? I asked, because if there is a question that haunts men of a certain age, it is that one then. He said, you buy a better kettle, and you teach your son how to walk into a room without losing himself. He slept well and dreamed nothing. At all in the morning, I put on the jumper Margaret loved. It's the one that's going at the elbows, because Christmas is for old faithful things. I made a list of timings for the day itself. Oven on at 9, turkey in at 10, potatoes parboiled at 15:15, parsnips at 11, sprouts at 11:45, gravy assembly at 12 and pinned it to the cupboard like a battle plan. At 10, the completion email arrived. Funds landed in my account with a chime that sounded more like relief than triumph. Rohit confirmed he had lodged the DS1 electronically, and the land registry would show the discharge by close of play. Tomorrow, I stood very still in the little kitchen that had held every version of me for 30 years and said out loud, we are done. And then, because I am a man built by a woman who understood both mercy and boundaries, I wrote to Bernard, funds received, charge released. The trust is declined. We'll see you at Christmas lunch if you are able to bring yourselves. To prefer family to choreography. His reply was short. We'll send a hamper. Send what you like, I thought. The only thing we're eating on the 25th is honesty. At 12:30, Aunt Rose arrived with mince pies that smelled like childhood and thundered her way into the flat with the confidence of a marching band. Where do you want me? Psh, demanded, and where's the sherry? Pointed. She poured, and we made a kitchen into a church. Later, as we peeled potatoes and argued about the correct size for parsnips, my phone vibrated with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I did. Mr. Bennett. A woman's voice, smooth, professional, with a London that had gone to school. This is Eloise Fielding, personal assistant to Mr. Bernard Fairchild. I'm calling to let you know that Penelope and Bernard will not be attending Christmas lunch. They have arrangements. They do, however, send their regards. Thank you, I said. Please tell them we'll keep a seat warm anyway. I will, she said. And Mr. Bennett. Yes, Happy Christmas, she said. and something in the way she said it made me think that she'd seen the world. From both sides of the desk, "Happy Christmas, Eloise," I said. When I hung up, Aunt Rose handed me a sprout and a knife and said, "There are people who don't know the difference between a tree and a bauble. They will not be those people." As if to prove her right, the bell rang again. I wiped my hands, walked to the door, and opened it on Isabella. She stood in the cold with a paper bag that said something fashionable, a scarf pulled up to her chin, and a look that had learnt a lot in 24 hours. I didn't know what to bring, she said. So I brought this. She held out the bag like an apology wrapped in tissue. It smelt of oranges. "Come in," I said, and stepped aside. She came in like someone stepping off a stage and onto grass heels, careful eyes taking the measure of a new sort of quiet. The bag rustled. It smelt of oranges. The scent rode the warm air of the flat as if it had been expected. "In the kitchen," I said, and she followed me down the short hall. Past the bookshelf with Margaret's lamp humming its tiny, faithful hum, Aunt Rose looked up from her station at the table, hands white with flour. "Oh," she said, taking in the coat, the hair. "The bracelet that could have directed traffic? A princess. Take off your crown, love. You'll be wanting both hands." Isabella's face tilted towards a smile that didn't know if it had permission. "I'm not very handy," she said. "Nobody's handy until they are," Aunt Rose said. "What's in the bag?" Isabella lifted out a net of clementines, a jar of whole cloves. And because she never did anything by Havza panettone wrapped in paper so thick it could have stopped a door, "Pomanders," she said, with a slightly defiant brightness. "Mummy used to make them when we were small." Or rather, her mouth twitched. Nanny did. And Mummy said how charming. "Good," Aunt Rose said, brisk but not unkind. "We'll stud these little sons and make the house smell like a hymn. Arthur, get the bowls. And the ribbons. If you've still got them from the year Margaret made the mantle look like a choir." I found the ribbons dusty red, resigned green in the drawer that holds string and batteries and hope, and we set them on the table. Isabella unbuttoned her coat and hung it on the back of a chair, then rolled up her sleeves. For a second, I saw the pale inside of her wrist, where the bracelet didn't reach, and the delicate blue road of a vein that made her look less assembled and more alive. "Tea?" I asked. "Yes," she said too quickly, and then gentler. "Please." We worked, the flat filled with the clean, tender sting of cloves, with the oil of clementine skin released by the point of a thumbnail. You mark a line first quarter. The orange with a ribbon and make a cross where it meets. Then press the cloves into the other spaces so the fruit wears a studded coat. It is absorbing work, the sort that makes thinking behave itself. My mother never let the kitchen smell like onions, Isabella said suddenly, not looking up. Or garlic. It was always lilies and polish. We had a chef for a time, for parties. He made little things you ate off sticks. She offered the last word like proof in a case she wasn't sure she was winning. I used to sneak into the larder and eat a spoonful of jam with a finger and a biscuit and a terrible fear of getting caught. Everyone's first rebellion is sugar, Aunt Rose said. Second is salt. Third is telling the truth. Isabella glanced at me. "That's why I came," she said. "To tell the truth." "All right," I said. The kettle clicked the way a good counselor might. "I didn't say you couldn't come for Christmas," she said quietly. I didn't. I didn't have the courage to say you could. That's worse, in a way. "It is," I said softly. "And it's also human." Her eyes flicked to the photo of Margaret on the mantelpiece. The one in which she's holding a Christmas pudding like a miracle she made herself. "I never met her," Isabella said. "We spoke once. At the engagement party, when you were outside pretending not to smoke." She smiled a little. She smelt of oranges. "Do you know that?" "I do," I said. She hid clementine peel in the radiators. Isabella laughed properly then, a quick, bright sound that made the room briefly. Its best self. "She told me to be kind to Michael on Sundays," she said. "Because he always gets sad on Sundays and hides it by making plans for Monday." "He does," I said. And for a second we were a small committee convened around a single, beloved problem. Isabella speared a clove at the wrong angle and winced. Aunt Rose slid the bowl towards her. Turn the clove the other way up, she said. You're trying to spear it with its hat on. Ah, Isabella said, and the second one went in cleanly. She looked down at the orange in her hands like it had told her an old family story she'd borrowed and now loved. Arthur, she said, without looking up, I'm sorry. I waited, because apologies, to earn their keep, must find their own feet. I'm sorry for letting it happen, she said. For hiding behind tradition and pretending it was air when it was a wall. I am sorry for making Michael choose the easy way, which is to say the wrong way, because it kept the picture looking tidy for my parents. Tidy pictures aren't true pictures, Aunt Rose muttered, tying a bow as if she were throttling a swan. And I am sorry, Isabella went on, eyes on the clove she was pressing, for thinking of you as a problem to be managed rather than a person to be loved. I suppose, she stopped, let the quiet hold her. I suppose I thought your kindness was a lever I could pull. There it was, the strike of flint on stone. The flare. You're not the first, I said. You will not be the last, but you might be the one who stops. She nodded, face angled down, and for a second she looked very young as I imagined she was when someone first told her what a family is supposed to look like. I want to be different, she said, and the ribbon she was holding trembled. With the bird lift of the word want, Aunt Rose sniffed.
Different isn't a word,
she said. It's what you put on your plate. Will you do the washing up? Will you say sorry when you should? Will you let people be as messy as you are? Isabella looked at me and I saw her make the smallest, bravest decision. Yes, she said, not prettily. I will. Set the finished pomanders. In a blue bowl, Margaret bought one wet April in Whitstable and carried home on her lap the whole train ride like an egg. The flat was suddenly December's idea of heaven's citrus and spice. Heat and weather-safe laughter. I poured tea and topped up the sherry. The panettone sat like a modest crown on the counter. We'll do this after lunch, I said. Otherwise, Aunt Rose will commit a crime with custard. I heard that, Aunt Rose said cheerily. I've got a lawyer on speed dial. Took our cups to the little table by the window. The light outside had that thin gold edge London gives you as an apology in winter. How are you? I asked Isabella. Because after all the principles and positions, that is the only question. That matters. Scared, she said. Happy and scared. Sick in the mornings. Tired in the afternoons. Awake at 3, because my brain thinks that's when it's most efficient at worrying. Her mouth quirked. It has a point. I'm less fond of my parents than I thought. Fonder of Michael. Fonder of the idea of my child than I thought one could be of an idea. Welcome, Aunt Rose said. It's a club. No membership fee. Just bring biscuits. Isabella's eyes shone a little and then didn't. Bernard and Penelope, she began, and then stopped, retraced her sentence. Mummy and Daddy think you're overreacting, and you, I asked. I think they'd call anyone overreacting who didn't do what they wanted, she said quietly. I think they're elegant bullies. That's very precise, I said. I've had practice, she said. They wanted us to do the trust. They said it would cut through the mess. They are excellent with mess and make it look like an aesthetic choice. She wrapped her hands around her cup. Michael said no. I know, I said, and something. In me that had been clenched since October unclenched, said yes to something else. He said yes to you, she said. He said yes to himself. We were quiet for a while in the old, good way, the kettle muttered. The hum of Margaret's lamp went on doing its job. Outside. A kid in a red coat fell over on the path, and then lay on the frost, laughing so loudly you could hear his happiness from the second floor. Can I help on Christmas Day? Isabella asked, and the way she said this sentence, carefully, as if it might break if she made me love her a little and forgive her a little more. I don't know how to do any of this. I can decorate a table that looks like a hotel, and order wine that tastes of saying you know about wine. But I don't know. Can you peel potatoes? Aunt Rose asked. I can learn, she said. And Aunt Rose slid a sack towards her with a grin like a dawn. We'll have you doing sprouts with chestnuts by tea time, Aunt Rose said. And we'll send you home with a blister to show your parents. They'll be appalled. Isabella said, eyes dancing, voice fresh. Good Aunt Rose said. Sometimes the right thing starts as appalling. When we had washed the last of the clove out of our fingernails and eaten a slice of panettone that even Aunt Rose approved of its cake disguised as bread, my kind of religion, Isabella stood and smoothed her sleeve in a motion I recognized as the body remembering a room that would demand something of it. There's something else, she said, and she looked a little ill saying it, which is how you know someone is realigning their life. The trust Bernard wanted, it wasn't just about you. It was going to tie us to them. There were clauses about family holidays and where the baby would spend Christmas and which schools would be considered. Not overt, not legally enforceable in a court. You'd have to be grotesque to try, but enforceable socially. Financially, they would hold it over us every time we deviated. She smiled without humor. The word they use. Thank you for telling me, I said. I didn't say, because I didn't need to, that I knew that sort of clause. It's the sort of clause that has never seen the inside of a statute and yet runs 1,000 lives. And you don't want that life, she said slowly, as if assembling a cabinet without instructions, a small house that smells of onions, and a table that's a bit too crowded, and someone who doesn't care if I get the gravy. Wrong. Then you're in the right kitchen, Aunt Rose said, setting down the knife with a firm little click. At that moment, the door opened without a knock. Michael, remembering he didn't have to ask to come in, ate a coat. This time, he had a bag of bread from the baker, still warm, the crust singing a little in the cool air of the hall. He had his mother's way of standing still for a second before he found us. I thought you might need this, said, lifting the bread. And I wanted to. He trailed off at the sight of the bowl of oranges. Aunt Rose's floury hands, Isabella's peeled sleeves. Ch. Oh, he said, and his eyes went soft. Wash your hands, Aunt Rose said, because no boy of mine, however big, escapes an aunt's hygiene, then you can do the parsnips. He went obediently to the sink, smiling at Isabella in the way you smile at the person you married for. A reason you've just remembered. When he turned back, hands dripping, he caught my eye. There was a question in it, and an answer and a thank you. We peeled, we sliced, we studied the tray like a chessboard. We made a batter for Aunt Rose's Yorkshire puddings, which she insists belong on every plate, whether there is beef or not, because rules were made by men who never met batter. We started the stock up again, and the flat smelt like the inside of a cookbook written by someone with sleeves rolled up. Later, after they'd left with a promise to come at 10 on Christmas morning and a sack of potatoes that Aunt Rose had pressed on them like a sacrament, I sat down in the chair by the window and allowed myself to feel the sort of tired that only visits people who have done something brave enough to earn sleep. The phone buzzed. Rohit, all completed smoothly in. The end. You're clear. Fancy a pint tomorrow? I can bring the forms we forgot to sign when I was distracted by the trifle. I wrote back. Tomorrow I've got carols at St. Michael's with Aunt Rose. Then a visit to Mr. Chen upstairs because his boiler is sulking. But come by after. Bring that. Tie again. It deserves a second life, he replied with a thumbs up and a gif of someone inserting sprouts into a stocking. Solicitors, it turns out, know how to live. I made another list, not of food this time, but of the things I wanted to put right while the world was briefly aligned with goodwill. Call Ms. Patel about the school bursary. Speak to Rohit about updating. The will ask Mrs. Foster if she'd come to ours on the day. She hates the Holmes pudding. Write to Michael. Not the practical email. A letter. The bursary was Margaret's dream. 32 years in the classroom had taught us that the brightest eyes rarely had the bus fare. We'd talked about it all the way back from the crematorium, Aunt Rose and I, in the sticky quiet of the car, and I'd said I would do it in her name when the time came. The time had come. The money I had been using to prop up a house that could not hold me could instead open doors for children. Margaret had loved without ever learning their middle names, and the will. The idea had arrived during the meeting at the Garrick, like a small bird landing on a fence, unobtrusive, complete. If I was to leave anything, it would be to someone who had not yet learned to ask for it. Not to steal from Michael, but to protect him from himself, from expectation. from the sort of patterned pressure that smiles while it squeezes. A trust for the baby. A simple one. No choreography. Independent trustees. No conditions that humiliated anyone or turned Christmas into an obligation. It's just a shelter written in plain English. It would be there whether or not we deserved it on a Tuesday. I rang Rohit in the morning. A trust, said, pleased as only a man with a file can. B. For the grandchild. Yes. Discretionary until 21, with a lean to education and first home. And a band put it in bold on, anything that smells like lifestyle enhancement for the parents. It's trustees you can bully and who will bully. Back you, Aunt Rose. Maybe Ms. Patel from the school. Do. You want an independent? He said. You don't want the family to eat itself? Suggest one, I said. I will. And we can add a line in the letter of wishes about Christmas. Conditions, I said. I could hear him smile at the other end. No conditions, he agreed. Just an invitation. Yes, I said, relieved he had followed me to the point without my having to point to it. An invitation to a table where there will always be a place, not because of behavior, but because of blood and grace. I'll draft, he said. We'll sign before New Year if you like. Margaret would tell me off if I let you dither, what I said, and the lamp hummed in agreement, and the bursary. Patel will love you for giving her a check and a reason to buy children's shoes, he said. We'll set it up properly. Make a little fuss in the newsletter. You hate fuss. She loves it. You can compromise by standing in the back of the photo. Deal, I said. We hung up and I made eggs. The radio played a carol sung by a choir of boys who were very serious about time signatures. The post came. A card from the woman in the bakery with a snapshot of her daughter biting a croissant like an apple. And the hamper Bernard had promised Fortnum's, of course, the ribbon that could restrain a horse. I lifted the lid. Stilton. Biscuits. So thin they were really intentions. A jar of brandy butter that had never been within a mile of brandy. A card that said in Penelope's handwriting, Season's greetings. No love, no names, just the phrase people use when they've got through life by keeping doors clean and closed. I took out the mince piece pretty, precising, put them on the windowsill for the birds. I'm not heartless. I ate the damson jam. The phone rang in the afternoon as Aunt Rose and I were rehearsing the timing for the Sprouts for the third time. An unknown number clipped and almost apologetic like a new pair of shoes. Mr. Bennett, the voice said. Eloise Fielding. Hello, Eloise, I said. Is everything all right? You sound like someone in a corridor. I'm in a corridor, she said with a little laugh and the kind of discretion that knows where the rugs are. I wanted to let you know that Mr. and Mrs. Fairchild will be wintering in Verbier from Boxing Day. How splendid, I said. I hope the snow is less ambitious than they are. That would be difficult, she said, and the tiny treachery in her voice made me like her. There's something else. Bernard intends to make a donation to Michael's Furman-endowed lecture series in legal ethics. She let the words hang. He believes it will refocus loyalties. Thank you, I said. For telling me and for using your adjectives like he uses checks. Does Michael know? Not yet, she said. He will. He will have to choose what to do when told. I thought you might prefer not to be surprised. I do, I said. And Eloise, yes? Come to ours on Boxing Day if you have nowhere better, I said. We will have leftovers and no lilies. There was a silence, the sort that looks at itself and decides whether to be hope or habit. Thank you, she said finally. May I told Aunt Rose what Eloise had said. Of course they will try to buy the air around him, she said. Let them. It'll smell of lilies. He'll choke. Still, I said, better to prepare him. I wrote a letter to Michael that night at the table with the nick in it, from the time Margaret tried to crack a lobster and the lobster refused to be cracked. Dear Michael, I am writing this because paper does not interrupt and letters feel less like orders and more like invitations. We have done something hard this week, and I am proud of you. It is a strange word to use of a man of your age, but there it is. I am proud of you. There are two kinds of inheritance, money and manners. Money goes where it is pointed if the person with the pen holds it straight. Manners go where they are, observed and return when they are reciprocated. Your mother and I did not leave you much of the first until recently. We tried to leave you a great deal of the second. You are going to be a father. When your child arrives, every story you tell. Your self against me will begin again in a cradle with your face on. Be careful. Be kind. Teach them that apologies are not losses, but receipts. Bernard will attempt to pay for your dignity. Do not let him. He will offer you carved shapes of influence. If you take them, make sure your name is on the bottom, not his. And remember, people who say they like things tidy often mean they like things theirs come on Christmas Day. Wear a jumper you can spill gravy on. It will make the table into the place it is meant to be. A map. Love. Dad, I sealed it. Then I unsealed. It added a small P.S. that made my chest go hot and then cool. P.S. I am setting up a trust for your child. It is not to punish you, nor to reward you. It is because I can. Consider it a pomander, the sort of thing one hangs in a room, so it smells of good decisions when the door is opened. On Christmas Eve morning, we went to St. Michael's. The incense did its old trick of making the air feel older than you. Choir sang descants that lifted the roof slightly without making a fuss about it. I sat with Aunt Rose in a pew that has held enough grief and enough joy to qualify as a good chair, and thought about Margaret, who had once leaned over in this very spot and whispered, "We should have roast potatoes more often." I had agreed and then entirely failed to increase our roast potato quotient. 1/10s with the dead. To remember the things you got wrong, because it makes the getting right now taste better. When we came out, it was dusk. It's the cold sort that makes you glad of a scarf someone you loved made you, Mr. Chun's boiler hissed. In a way that meant it needed a man with a torch who would mutter and polish and then make it behave. I did the part of the ritual where a neighbor nods at a crossword clue and offers him tea. At home, we laid the table, straightened the cloth, set out the crackers that had jokes in them so bad you felt giddy with gratitude for trying. Almost. Put out Margaret's napkin rings, and then didn't, because they belonged to a story that would be told more softly later. I placed a small orange at each place, studded with cloves. Christmas morning arrived like it always does. Suddenly, exactly. On time. I woke before the light and lay in bed, listening to the distant sound of one radio blaring ferry. Tale of New York and a couple 2 floors down, trying to decide whether to put the turkey in at 9 or past. I went to the kitchen, turned the oven on, and stood while the room warmed its hands. At 10, a knock. I opened the door on Michael, cheeks bright, carrying a bottle of something sensible and the bread knife. I'd lent him in 2016, which had never found its way back and had come home today like a dog that knows where dinner is. Behind him, Isabella in a jumper that gave up any attempt to be sleek and settled for warm. A scarf round her neck like a small mistake she refused to correct. And a tiny, shy smile that will, I hope one day, be the undoing of her mother. "Merry Christmas," she said, and then because sometimes people need to be brave before they can be merry, and I'm sorry. She looked me in the face when she said it. "Merry Christmas," I said, "and thank you." We took our places. Aunt Rose demanded Michael carve because men with debts to their elders should put a knife to good use. He tried and did not fail. Isabella made peace with the sprouts. Gravy behaved like gravy that has read its part and decided to enjoy itself. We pulled crackers and wore paper crowns and read jokes, so feeble they had to be admitted to hospital halfway. Through the meal, Michael placed his knife down, looked at me, then at Isabella, then at the bowl of clove oranges on the sideboard. "I'm sorry," he said, "for forgetting the difference between help and habit, for confusing privacy with secrecy, for putting you in the worst possible role, the person you need and the person you exclude. I'm sorry, Dad." "Thank you," I said, and found that my mouth had turned treacherously into a line that made my nose sting. "You're forgiven." Rose sniffed with authority. "Right," she said. "I'll pass the roasties to the person whose apology was shortest." "That's the rule?" We laughed. We ate. We sat for too long in the way good rooms encourage you to do. And when the plates were cleared and the trifle arrived and Isabella announced that the baby currently preferred custard to anything sensible, I looked at the people at my table and understood the old, battered fact that justice is not only a matter of penalties, it is sometimes a matter of desserts. At 4, my phone buzzed with a message from a number saved as Crispin, because even men with cufflinks shaped like gavels must pay their phone bills. Merry Christmas, Mr. Bennett. Trust all is quiet on the Blackheath front. Fairchilds have departed for snow. I have arranged to deliver to your solicitor a deed of gift for your review in the new year. Mr. Fairchild would like to make a donation to your late wife's school bursary fund, if that is agreeable. It strikes me that some traditions are worth starting. I showed Rohit the message when he turned up late with a bottle of sherry and a scar, you see, he said, reading it twice. You threaten a man with decency long enough and he tries. It like a new tie. Do we accept? I asked. We accept, he said, with no naming rights. Agreed, I said. No plaques, no lilies. We made coffee. We took plates to neighbors. We watched the tail end of the Queen's Oar. Kings now broadcast on the telly and were surprised by how much we needed to hear someone talk about service without trying to sell us something after everyone had gone a kiss at the door. A promise to bring Tupperware next time. A last joke by the lift eye washed up the way one prays, methodically, a little mad, hopeful. The flat was full of quiet and crumbs, and the sound of the lamp humming a blessing. Then, because there is always a next step if you want there to be, I sat down and wrote one more letter, not to a person this time, but to a place. Dear Miss Patel, please. Find enclosed a check and the draft terms for the Margaret Bennett bursary. I would like the first award to be made in January to a pupil of your and your staff's choosing. You know the faces? Please do me the kindness of pretending I do too. There is one idiosyncratic stipulation. Each recipient, if they wish, will be invited to Christmas lunch at mine. They may ignore this for as many years as they like. But if one year they decide that they would like to sit at a table and argue about sprouts, there will be a chair with their name on it and a clementine with cloves in at their place. Yours. Faithfully, Arthur Bennett. I sealed it and put it by the door where letters stand upright like people waiting for trains. Then I took the ribbon from one of the oranges, tied it round the nick in the table, and went to bed. By the new year, the trust was signed, the bursary funded. And the Fairchilds had announced, in a glossy photograph taken by someone who knows which side is their best, that they were recalibrating our philanthropic focus. And if you think that is the end of arrogance, well, you haven't yet heard about the lecture series, or why it was canceled, or what happened when Eloise took a job somewhere you can smell onions.